So there is a group of people here in town that I really respect. They are part of a peace group, and every month they do. I believe it's the first Saturday of the month. They do a stand for peace on one of the corners. On some uh, Milwaukee street, and it's a different corner every month. But every month they are there. They've been there since the Vietnam War. Every every first Saturday of the month since the Vietnam War, this group of people has been taking a stand for peace. They have peace signs, they have peace doves, they have peace banners, and it's a very small core group of maybe 10 people, 10 to 15 at most, that that have been doing this since the 60s. And what I really admire about them is their commitment, but also how, they are completely unmoved by the news headlines of the day. It doesn't matter if we are in an active war at the moment. I mean, we always are in an active war somewhere. Or, you know, or if there is an active, war that's sufficient enough to make the news and people care about. It doesn't matter. They are there. And sometimes they are joined by lots of people, depending on what's going on in the news. When the war broke out with Iraq, they were joined by hundreds and hundreds of people, and they were on the news, and but that crowd dwindled down, and then when there were the protests around police brutality, whenever there was something in the news that people cared about, then the group grew again, to hundreds of people, and then it shrunk down to this 10 once the headlines faded. The difference between them, the core group, and all the people that join them is that the people that join them are motivated by the headlines of the day. Every time something gets under their skin, then they feel like they got to do something about it. But then, once the headlines go away, they kind of lose interest and they forget about it. And yet this group of 10 people is a placeholder. They provide a space. They provide a structure for when these things happen, that people are like, I need to get involved. Where can I get involved? And they can always find this group. And I think that this group is really, really important. And they're a good example for all of us, how we shouldn't be motivated by the news of the day. We're being manipulated when we watch the news. We only see what they want to show us. We don't know what's going on in the world. If we really want to make a difference, we need to be motivated by a set of values and principles that's deeper than that doesn't change with the wind. And these 10 people that are taking a stand for peace every Saturday, they are like that. They're motivated by a principle. And it doesn't matter what's going on, they will stand on that principle. Once a month, they will stand on that principle. And, a lot of times when people join them, the ones that are motivated by the headlines, they're full of piss and vinegar. They're angry and they're upset. And this group, not so much. I mean, they're angry, of course, but for them, it's more of a slow burn. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. They're in it for the long haul. They got to pace themselves, and so they don't get angry. They just show up. They show up for their hour. They stand for peace on the corner, and then they go have coffee and fellowship with each other at the local coffee shop, and then they do it again the next month. And I think that's the way real change happens. It's pressure and time, pressure and time. You don't have to go fast, but you have to be consistent. And you have to be motivated by principles that are deeper than, whatever is going on in the news at the moment. So it's a long story to kind of, introduce the gospel today. Because what really struck me in the gospel was the people were motivated by the headlines of the day. It says, some people told Jesus about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with the blood of their sacrifices. And Jesus said to them in reply, "Do you think that these Galileans suffered in this way because they were greater sinners than the other Galileans? By no means. Or what about the 18 people who were killed when the Tower of Siloam fell on them? Do you think that they were more guilty than everyone who lived in Jerusalem? By no means." These events, I don't think are recorded anywhere outside of the Gospels. That's how insignificant they are in the big picture of history. And yet, this is what they were worked up about. This is what was important to them, because this was what was going on in the moment. And Jesus brings them back to values that are deeper than that. He said the real tragedy, of course, isn't that these people died. We're all going to die. The real tragedy is when people die and they're not oriented towards the values of the kingdom of God. We need to be motivated by deeper principles than whatever is moving us in the news. And of course, this reading taps into the familiar theme that we keep hearing in the gospel, that, the world is not fair. Even God is not fair. Fairness is not a biblical virtue. People don't get what they deserve. Bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. Things happen. Sometimes they happen to you. Okay? And there's not a direct link, cause and effect, much of the time between the bad things that happen and, your actions and all that kind of stuff. And it's really insignificant in the frame of the big picture. In the frame of the big picture, you just have to be committed to those things that are really important, deep down, and to slowly plot your course according to those values.